The government gives us what they know we consume, that's what we eat. Kenyans eat politics almost every day. So they know that the only thing that we can throw at you to confuse you so that you don't hold us accountable is politics. And if we do that, then you would start citing I'm for Ruto, I'm for Raila. When I looked at per liter in the US, they're paying about 7.25 shillings per liter on taxes.
Okay.
Now, so when you talk about that the prices in the US and in Kenya, you are comparing them, and then you're saying that these prices are high everywhere, the question you need to ask yourself that if that is true, or that is just something that politicians have told you to make you believe it. The answer is that it's not true. I have seen so much suffering, even from the same people that supported this government, the ones that are called the hustlers. They do not have money that they can live on. My friend Jadiel, just the clergy needs to rise up and be consistent in speaking truth to power. And the way to speak truth to power is to stick to the scriptures and not to get to a point of realizing that because you're in a certain political party, then you are more closer to God than the one who is another political party.
A very good day to you. Welcome to Jadiel Kabiro Unfiltered here on Herman Manyora's YouTube platform. My name is Jadiel Kabiro. Today, we're looking at the voice of the diaspora community in Kenyan politics and governance. These conversations are always uncensored, and I hope my guest today will be as truthful as he'd want to be. These conversations also, I hope, will help our leaders make better policy decisions and informed political moves. The man I'm seated next to, he's been, in America for 18 years. He's seen George Bush, President Obama, he's seen President Donald Trump. He's also been now with the leadership of Joe Biden. He also seen President Kibaki here in Kenya. He's seen President Moi, he's seen President William Ruto, former President Uhuru Kenyatta. It's called J.M. Esmond. Great to see you. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. Thank you, Jadiel, for having me here. It's just a great pleasure. I've been seeing the great work you're doing, so it's an honor for me to be here for the first time in your show and to have a conversation, see what's going on in the country, maybe make some comparison on what we are seeing on the other side in the US. But overall, just have an honest conversation and have a feel of what really the country is going through and what our people are experiencing. And I think that's what I look forward to this conversation today.
For 18 years, you've been in America. You've seen different leadership styles from different presidents there and here. What is the general feeling from the diaspora community about President William Ruto, his leadership style, and what he's trying to achieve before, 2027?
Oh, well, I mean, President Ruto, he's just been in office for just 1 year. And he's a very, in my opinion, he's a very intelligent politician who has been there. He knows really the ins and outside of politics and governance and all that kind of stuff. But the difference is that, he's come in, there's so many things going on to the point that from a diaspora perspective, it looks like people are getting overwhelmed. There's no room to process one thing before you move to the next one. So that's really causing a lot of confusion. But overall, I think on paper, we are seeing a lot of good things being proposed, being articulated. But in reality, to actualize them has been a big challenge for us to see whether we are seeing the fruit of what is being announced. So in my opinion, I don't want to purport to speak for the entire diaspora, but I'm saying in my opinion, I feel like he's very ambitious, but probably his ambition is for a different country than Kenya.
Oh, really? You've used the word overwhelmed. Where do you observe that? You feel like he's overwhelmed. You're saying his ambition is not for Kenya. Let's try to correlate those two. Where do you see the overwhelming in his leadership?
I think the overwhelming is that every single day you wake up, there's something new being thrown at you. The citizens don't have time to process, to experience the implementation, and to assess to see the fruit. And now, the policy pronouncements, the changes that are being made, and again, you feel like it's as if Kenya is coming to an end. And therefore, we need to rush and really do these things in one day before the Kenya comes to an end. Just like when you hear, I'm from a religious background, and you can experience when people hear that the world is coming to an end, let's sell all our properties, let's do all these things because tomorrow we won't be there. In my opinion, I don't feel like we are taking the deliberate steps to ensure that what we have come up with, it's really understood by the citizens, even understood by the people who are supposed to implement those policies. And therefore, whenever we hear things being made, tomorrow we hear some contradictions. And therefore, we are like coming from behind as citizens and the diaspora to chase one thing after another. And you know, that becomes very challenging. But of course, the part where I talked about that is for another country is that we really come up with very good and very beautiful articulations and things that we mention. But when you look at the kind of people that we are dealing with, the Kenyan people, it's like there are so many gaps in between. So there is a need for us to fill the gaps before we can move to the next step. That's what I'm talking about. Like, it's really, they're good on paper, probably not for the current Kenya.
Yesterday he was in a church and he said we are lucky that he's the president of this republic. Said if it was someone else, this country would have been doomed.
Na mimi nafurahi sana kwamba mimi ni kiongozi wa Kenya wakati huu, wakati mambo yako magumu, kwa sababu inahitaji mtu kama mimi kuongoza maneno yakiwa magumu vile ilivyo. Kama tungekuwa na wengine, Kenya ingekuwa imezama.
Do you believe in what he said? If it were, say, Raila, this country would have been doomed. What do you think about that?
I think that's very hyperbolic, really. You know, one of the biggest mistakes you can ever do in leadership is to ever think you're the only one who can solve people's problems. Whenever you really come out, whether you are leading this program, whether I'm a pastor, and get to a point of thinking that I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm the only person who can save that church, I'm the only person who can lead this organization, that is the beginning of a downfall. Because what happens is that you need to recognize that whenever you're given an opportunity to serve or to lead, it is a privilege and an honor that you are given a chance to serve at such a time as that. There are many other people that can lead. There are many other people that can make a difference. And therefore, a statement like, we are lucky, I think it's a statement of making look like there's no other person who can do what this other person is doing. But I just want to say that what you're doing today, it is a great privilege that you are given a chance to bring this platform to the country, to the diaspora and the rest of the world. But if you are not here today, if I have to use a religious phrase, God will find someone else to do that work. And therefore, don't ever think that you're the only one who can do it.
He was in church actually when he said that, and you're countering him with a religious phrase.
I mean, really, I have no other place that I base my background on other than religion, because most of it informs a lot of my orientation and worldview, and therefore I look at it. And whenever pronouncements are made in the church, I think I have to look at it through the lenses of the Holy Scriptures. Is that really a humble way as a leader, as a servant leader, to really come out and talk to your people? And therefore, I disagree with that statement.
We'll get back to church later in the conversation, but I wanted us to start from a perspective of cost of living. Our post was all about, are Kenyans living a lie? You know, people would think, well, things are horrible globally. You're from the US, you've been there 18 years in Ohio. Let's start with the cost of fuel, cost of food, cost of healthcare there. President William Ruto says when it comes to fuel, things are bad globally. I think it's Boshole who said, look, with this Israel-Palestine war, we're going to see fuel prices go even higher. Is this the same case with America?
Well, I think there is some important things to note. Whenever there are crises in the world, for us being in the global village, it affects everybody. I think that really has to be given to everyone to understand that whenever you see, for example, in the Middle East, where they're oil producers, largely, and all that, whenever you see the crisis that we have seen in Ukraine and in Russia and all that kind of stuff, and any crisis in the world that really most of the world depend on, it does affect many things, either production, value chain, or how we can access to those. So that's really something that we cannot debate. But then the question comes in that in the event of such crisis, what then do you do to be able to cushion your people against the shocks that come in with such kind of crisis. How prepared are you as either a member of a household, maybe if it's your family? How prepared are you as a leader of an organization, whether you are leading, you are a CEO of a company and all that? How prepared are you if you are the government of the day? Because one of the things that you have to be sure of is that crisis will keep coming. And therefore, our response is what matters. Do we start crying and saying that, because of the crisis, then we just let people to, die just like everybody else? Or do we take steps? So let me give you an example. You mentioned the issue of fuel. The fuel prices, and I'm told, I think earlier on I was talking to some colleagues, and I thought the prices of petrol is like 211 shillings, but they told me it's about 217. That's what they were telling me.
Yes.
And then I tried to compare the average prices right now in the US. Of course, they do it per gallon. It's about $355 per gallon. Per gallon. Which translates to about 170, I think it's 142 per liter. Yeah. If my math is correct. But then when I looked at what is really causing these fuel prices to be higher, it's obviously I saw that per liter we are paying about 76 shillings on taxes and levies. But when I looked at per liter in the US, they are paying about 7.25 shillings per liter on taxes. Okay. Now, so when you talk about that the prices in the US and in Kenya, you are comparing them, and then you're saying that these prices are high everywhere, the question you need to ask yourself that if that is true, or that is just something that politicians have told you to make you believe it. The answer is that it's not true. Then the next question you ask yourself is that why is our fuel prices higher than somewhere else? Yes. In fact, higher than in, I think we are only better than maybe 11 countries in Africa. True. But most of the other countries, out of the 54 that we have, most of the other countries are doing better in terms of their fuel prices. So that alone tells you that the statement that our prices are comparable to the rest of the world is not true. But then the third is what I just mentioned. What then happens is that why are we paying higher? It's because of the taxes and the levies on that, not because the global taxes are higher than than they were. So would you say it's better to live in America than to live in Kenya when you look at the economic times we're living in? I would say so, and there are many reasons for that. And obviously, I will look at, for example, let's look at the unemployment rate. Right now, the federal unemployment rate in the U.S. is at the latest data shows that it's about 3.8%. Typically, the projection was that it was supposed to be at 3.7. We hit at 3.8% unemployment rate. Okay. Now, the full employment in the U.S., according to the economists, is that it's supposed to be at 3.6%. Let me tell you what that means. 3.6% is called full employment, meaning anybody who is looking for a job has a job. Anybody who is looking for a job and who needs a job has a job. When you are at 3.6% unemployment rate. So at 3.8 right now, there are so many places people are having jobs here and there, and there are many companies that are saying that we are hiring, we are looking for people to hire. Manual laborers, you mean? Manual laborers, even professionals and all that. There's so many people. Now, then when you compare the way we are dealing with it here is that unemployment rate is very high. Yeah. And there are very few, if any, people that are hiring, companies that are hiring. In fact, others are even laying people off. And if not that is the case, they're even closing shop. So then that alone tells me that you're better off living in the US than here because you are able to access job and work to do. But that's not the full story. When you compare let's look at the minimum wage. Yeah. From what I understand from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics is that the minimum wage in Kenya is about what 15,000 12 to 15,000 12 to 15,000 per month. Now, when you look at that, it translates to less than 23,000, which is the threshold for people who live in the low income, actually under poverty level. So meaning anybody below 23,000 monthly pay, you are under the poverty line.
And what's the minimum wage in some states in America?
The federal, no, let me talk about the federal, and then I'll talk about the states. There are others that range from, $14 an hour. Others, right now, even people in high school, 16-year-olds, are being paid like $14 to $15 to $16 an hour to work. And of course, most of them start working when they are like 16 years old and up. And so at the end of the day, you find that people are making significantly higher than what we are making here. And so when you compare that, how much, of course, the cost of living can be higher because of the things, but people are making like $14 an hour. These are probably high school kids or people just finished high school, and they're living with their parents. They're probably not paying rent and things like those. But pretty much you can get a job that you're making significantly higher.
There's no way you can compare how people are living in Kenya and in America. There's no way, if you hear that things are bad globally, we should not compare ourselves with other countries. Is that what you're saying?
I find it very unfair to compare Kenya and the US. I really find it unfair, because when I look at the way we live here, Jadiel, to be honest, we are not doing well. The country is doing very badly in terms of how much money people are making. And when you look at how much those who are actually able to get something to do. And when we are talking about the minimum wage right now in Kenya is about 12 to 15,000 a month. There are many people working in restaurants and many other places who are being paid like 8,000, 9,000. So that minimum wage we are talking about here is not something that actually people make.
Now, what can we do to fix this? Because the problem, the bone of contention here in Kenya is that we need to solve our economic crisis by taxing people. What do you feel about that?
I mean, really, I don't know if there is anybody who has ever fixed the economy by taxing people. Because what you're doing is that you are really taxing people already paying taxes. Because one of the biggest challenges that we have in this country is that we don't have a lot of people. For example, when you talk about unemployment rate, we're looking at people who actually are not bringing in money in order for them to be taxed. So when we are taxing, we are going for people that are already being taxed, and we are trying to tax them more.
Let me hold you at that, because the president yesterday, I just remember, he said the problem in this country ni watu wanangethia. Ngethia meaning people are idle. Should we blame these idle people, or should we first fix the economy? I've just remembered it now.
I think, I don't know where I was coming from with that, so I would love to get the context. But overall, I think we are dealing with a situation where there's actually no employment. Really, if we are talking about that, there are people out here who would be seeing signs everywhere saying that we are hiring and we are looking for people. But I can tell you, I know of many people. I mentor some students, about college graduates, about 118 of them, and most of them every single day they ask me about if I can help them to get online jobs because they cannot find anything to do. And some of them are actually now employed or underemployed, if it were. Somebody who is a graduate and is being paid about 15,000 Kenya shillings or even less. So it's not that they are lazy. It's just because they don't have what to do. So what do we do here? We need to think of how we can really create jobs by encouraging investors. Because one of the challenges that we have is that we have made the environment so difficult for people to invest in this economy in order to create jobs for people. But if we go back and try to really do everything we can to ensure that the environment is favorable for investors, both domestic and foreign, then it's going to create the demand and create room for people who need to get jobs. And that's how we're going to
Why do you feel like the environment is not friendly? Because this is what
taxation.
This is what the president is doing every single week. He's somewhere in different parts of the world looking for investors. So do you mean all of that is meaningless because we do not have anything here that is friendly to the investors?
I mean, you don't look for investors by just going to talk to them. There has to be an environment for them to see that there's value for my investment. So for me to come to you and convince you that I want you to come and invest in my country, and when I come in, I realize that you are taxing me much higher, then I look at how much profit I'm going to make and how well it is for me to be able to expand, grow, and create jobs. So you can come and convince me and tell me, but when I come to the reality and I do my math, it doesn't add up. So the investors, even if it were you, if I gave you money and you know you are going to get the returns, you don't need to be convinced by anybody. You will actually be the one reaching out to the president, can I come and invest in your country? But the fact that we are hearing news and information saying that some investors are actually leaving the country to other places, which maybe the cost of doing business is going to be a little bit more favorable, whether in terms of electricity, in terms of taxation, in terms of other types of networks that we have, then that tells you that there's a bigger problem than just going to convince people. You need to convince them by creating an environment that is favorable. That's what I would say.
The diaspora remitted 48.1 billion.
It's a lot of money.
In 2023. Do you feel like this money should be coming to Kenya? From a diaspora perspective, you feel like your money is being put to use here in the country?
The question would be, where did that money go to? It was sent for consumption. It was sent because the relatives cannot afford food. We send money to buy food for our relatives. They cannot afford medical care. We send money to pay for that. We are being asked to contribute in a Harambes every single day on things that I think the government should be taking care of, so that the money you have mentioned should come now into investment.
So the people you send money to are not investing in anything. Is this
there's nothing left for them to invest, because you're sending them to consume. Whenever you send them, in most of the times, of course there are those who send money for investment, but the majority of the money that is coming in now, if you look at it, and I have to interact with the data again, is that most of it is coming in to do things, either pay school fees, which is probably even including in high school, some of it we expect the government should be taking care of, pay bills of medical and all otherwise, and that is really what is crippling even the diaspora, that should actually be encouraged to bring this money into investment. So for me, I think the government needs to get its acts together and ensure that the money that is coming in from the diaspora is put to good use of expanding this economy. You know,
there are talks, you talk to me about the cost of living there, and there are talks here that people in diaspora in America, they cannot even come to Kenya to bury their loved ones. People in diaspora, they have to use connect flights. They cannot, for them to come to Kenya, it takes years for them to book a flight, for them to afford flight tickets. Is this the case? And there's so much you're sending to our people back at home. Is this the case? Can you balance life there and here in Kenya?
It's you know the point you're raising there, it's really important. I don't think I've addressed this anywhere else. Let me address it here. One of the reasons why that is the case is because much of the money that people are making in the US or in the diaspora, if it were, is that much of that money, they actually make it so that other people can live and survive in Kenya. So when a tragedy like death comes, all the money that you have been making, you cannot afford that ticket because you have been sending all the money to take care of the people at home. So that needs to be very well understood. So if that wasn't the case, we probably would be having some savings to be able to afford. But obviously that's not for everybody, because as you understand, I mean, not everyone that really has a challenge with being able to afford to come to Kenya. And of course Kenyans come together very well in the US. They can support each other to come and bury their loved ones. And again, it's expensive obviously to fly from the US coming here. I mean, probably our flight this past day was about 300,000 Kenya shillings. I mean, really, they can be expensive. But what I'm saying is that it's important for us to ensure that even when people are in the diaspora, they also have their own bills, they have their own expenses, but also let's not squeeze them so much to the extent that they have nothing to even come and bury their loved ones.
The reason why I've brought that question is because I feel like most people I meet, I interact with, especially the people that watch our show, feel like they're not included when it comes to policies that are being laid out in the administration. Is this the case where you feel like all you do is send money home and there's nothing the government is doing to support, Kenyans living abroad?
Right. I mean, I would say it's been the case for a long time. But on this one, I would say that I think things are changing. With the new, Department of Diaspora Affairs, of course, there's a Foreign and Diaspora Affairs. I feel like there has been more interaction, especially with our current PS, that's in Jogo for the Diaspora Affairs. I think she's been doing a lot of good work in engaging the diaspora, getting to listen to, and this administration creating that department was very important, so that the voices of the diaspora can be listened to. And we need to move now from this issue of remitting finances and start now remitting skills. Because when this department has been created, it's about time that we talk about diaspora remittances in terms of skills and expertise, so that we can build our country. So that when I come home, you don't look at me like somebody, you know, if I go to look for a job somewhere, people look at me like I don't need to be given a job because maybe you can't fit in and things like that. There are people who have been blocked from accessing even opportunities in this country, and yet they've been trained in the diaspora. But I think it's about time that we start realizing that our brothers and sisters, they know a thing or two by being out there, which they can bring home for us to benefit. Yeah.
So you feel like is this discrimination real?
It's real.
You come from America, you have been trained, you try to come back to Kenya to work, and then you haven't qualified, or what?
No, I think it's one of those that when you try to, there are many reasons. One, of course, is that the people that are trying to employ you, they know that if you try to point out where the issues are, that you're probably going to put them in trouble. So there are those who are actually genuinely scared because they love the status quo. When you have been somewhere else, you have traveled, if you have traveled from your home area, I don't know where that is, you've come to Nairobi, when you go home, you see things differently. When you have traveled outside the country and you come back to Kenya, you see things differently. And with a very genuine, clean heart, you want to see things change. But if you are being blocked by those who like the status quo, then you don't bring in what you have learned and what you have benefited from other countries to benefit your own country. And that becomes, you know, a problem. One of the things that I always tell people is that when you have a viewpoint, when you look at something from outside, you have a better way of seeing things than when you are looking at it from inside. So I always tell people that when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So it's important that we start looking at our economy, our government, our way of doing things differently than the way we have always looked at it. So that's why sometimes take yourself out of that situation, look at it from outside.
What do you think then is the biggest problem with the Kenya Kwanza leadership? Because for so many people, things are not working out. It's 1 year down the line. We're trying to fix the economy. We are seeing, development tours by the president every week on hand. They're in churches every single Sunday. And we're saying this is a decapitated government. Their coffers were supposed to be empty, but the fuel guzzlers, they travel with to villages. How can we try to fix this? Because it seems like we are not as broke as they are, having these tours that they're having.
Right. I think ask me to talk about what's bad with the
you can also
Kenya
talk about
Kwanza.
the good. You can also talk about the good things.
I think really, in my opinion, so far, I think it's a government that has really mastered the art of the people that they are leading, meaning that they know who they are leading, and therefore they don't expect that they are going to be held accountable, and whatever they say, they don't mean it. I think it's too much talk, little to do with actualization of the promises that are being made. And that is really on what we have talked about, the issue of the cost of living. Let me tell you, the biggest thing is, as I mentioned earlier, is that the issue of really trying to overwhelm the country with so many programs and so many projects that they want to implement at once. We need to space these things out and let the country grow gradually from one step to the other. So for me, the Kenya Kwanza is one of those governments that indeed had some goodwill of the people when they came to power. They sold a lot of hope, but I think it was empty hope.
Right now, I'm just thinking about healthcare, and Madaraka's speech, it was all about healthcare. Once you have an emergency, you can be treated for free. Kimani Chungo was yesterday saying you'll be paying an NHIF at 300 shillings. Isn't this a step towards the right direction?
Oh yeah, by talk, yeah.
But what do you mean by talk?
Because I mean, really, one of the things that we're going to judge me by is what I've been saying. How much have I implemented? But what makes you be confident that this promise is going to be actualized? We have to go back and look at the history. Because there's been so many promises. I was as we were coming over here, I wanted to see some electric motor. What do you call them?
Electric motorcycles.
Yeah, I didn't see much of those. I didn't see any.
There are some.
There could be. But there's so many promises that we have given, which are very good, and I wish, honestly, we could implement them. But I feel like we need to do the first things first. But healthcare is very important. If it indeed comes to pass the way it's been spelled out, I can tell you that is a game changer for this country. Healthcare and education, those are things that we cannot play about, the lives of people. We need to really hope and pray that that is going to be implemented.
What is the cost of healthcare in US, even as you're finishing your statement? Sorry
that's fine.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off. What is the cost of healthcare in US? Because from what I hear, you cannot be treated without your insurance in America. You will die. Is this the case?
That is not absolutely true. Obviously, if you don't have insurance, and it depends on different categories. There are those who are given the government insurance for free, depending on your income. Okay. And most of the people, for example, the part of what I have done for the last 7 years, I've worked with the state of Ohio under the Department of Medicaid. Medicaid is a form of the insurance which is for low-income people, and therefore most people who don't afford or cannot afford are given that insurance for free, and you can be treated. But also when it comes to like emergency or going to the emergency room and stuff like that, you get treated for free, and then they ask about it later. But to be honest, I think the cost of healthcare in the US is higher than other developed countries, and they're working on fixing that. So that I can say that. However, it's not that you will go into the emergency room or the hospital and be turned away because you don't have insurance. You'll be treated, and then you talk about this, and then you're not going to be detained in a hospital because you're not able to pay.
That is something that happens here.
Yeah, that's what I've seen that we have had to fundraise because someone has been detained, or even a body has been detained in some morgue somewhere you can't bury. When I see happening here, and I think those are things that indeed we need to work and fix. So the story of that, yes, comparing the healthcare in the US and in Kenya, I think those who don't have insurance, who don't have jobs, who have low income, they'll be treated. They will get government insurance. Those who have jobs, obviously they pay higher.
Do you see willingness from the current administration to get things rolling, to change the situation we have in this country? Because we are too much into politics right now. We're also talking about 2027, leadership. People are structuring themselves. Raila Odinga was told he endorsed Kalonzo. He came out, said he did not endorse Kalonzo. We're already in 2027 politics. Is there a willingness to work for the people in this political status quo?
I think the willingness is, are people willing to be worked for? Because, the government gives us what they know we consume, that's what we eat. Kenyans eat politics almost every day. So they know that the only thing that we can throw at you to confuse you so that you don't hold us accountable is politics. And if we do that, then you would start citing I'm for Ruto, I'm for Raila. But the things that need to really unite us, it's this issue of cost of living, is the issue of unemployment, is the issue of healthcare and education. But because they know that they want you to align to a certain political persuasion, then we introduce politics so that you don't hold us accountable as the people that you have elected. So the problem, as much as we say it's with the politicians, it's much more with the people that they know that if we throw this at you, we got you.
So what have you observed in your 18 years life in America when it comes to politics and governance? What have you observed that you would say, if Kenyans adopt this, then we would probably be heading towards the right direction? Not to say like America is doing things okay, but what have you observed?
Separate money and politics. Politicians should not even anywhere close to money. Let me tell you, Jadiel, we really keep making these things like it's a joke, and that's where I think we go wrong. When you have the politicians are the ones that make decisions about money, they're the ones who are going to implement it. Like, look at the things that we are doing right now, even with the legislators, where they need to have them, like whether it's what do you call it, CDFs and all this kind of stuff. I mean, we need to separate politicians with money. Those things need to be separate. Such that when a politician comes to your area, you don't look at him as somebody who is coming to buy you food and to solve your money problems. You look at them as people who are going to make laws and also come up with policies. And they actually shouldn't even be coming up with policies. That's a different conversation. We should be coming up with laws
and
regulating it. But the people to deal with, to handle the money and all that, should be totally different from politics. But as long as the politicians are the ones that are handling the money, that's why even when a president passes around here, even an elected leader, everything stops. Because, that's the guy or the woman who carries your bag.
I was looking at Sakaja's Facebook page and people are commenting, Nairobi governor is too stingy, we need the other governor. Is this what you see with the congressmen in America? Have you ever noticed something like this?
No, I mean, really, there has been cases where even, I remember the time that my office was in downtown Columbus, and President Obama was speaking in a few blocks from there, and we didn't know the president was in town.
Oh.
Until later in the evening, we were like, oh, we were told the president was passing, but the congressmen and all that people, they're not as treated as semi-gods like what we do here. And that is the biggest problem because of the way in which we adore them, we elevate them above human beings, and therefore that really makes them feel like they have to do everything possible to remain in power. So and that is where that politics does.
How can we separate politics from money? How can we create that balance? Because President Uhuru Kenyatta, you know, he came with his cabinet secretaries, decided to do technocrats. You know, nothing really changed.
Right.
William Ruto comes, decides to do politicians. You know, we're still looking at the same situation. Right. So where should we start?
I think let's start from ensuring that, and I liked when recently there was a presentation by Professor Githumoigai when he presented the bombers, and he actually gave a very strong case why we should not have this whole thing of money being controlled by politicians. And one of those is that they use that to manipulate the people, because they what happens is that if your member of parliament comes to your constituency, and even now going to the MCAs, they are going to give the bursaries and stuff like that to people that align to them. And what that means is that they're using as a political tool to be able to continue remaining in power. But when that is not the case, they are going to know what their role is, and they are going to do and make laws and some kind of legislations that are going to benefit everybody, instead of knowing that even if I don't participate in what I'm elected to do, I have the money to go and buy the voters. And I think that's the part that we need to be very, very careful about. But also the other things that we need to do is that we need to empower, to look for ways of empowering the citizens in a way that either they participate in this kind of political and civic education, but also to be able to empower them economically, because most of the people that you see who go out there running to the politicians and everything is because they don't have anything to eat. But somebody who is in middle class, who is making, of course, middle class is another myth in Kenya, but we'll talk about it next time. But the people who don't have the money are the ones that are going to be manipulated more easily. But when you have money and you're able to support yourself, you actually going to be more careful on what laws are being made to make sure that you have good roads and everything that goes with that. But right now, because of the kind of citizens that we have, they actually depend on handouts, because they want to eat today, because they don't, they will be there tomorrow.
And that's why you went back before you said, are citizens willing to be worked for?
You know, that's the point.
That's the point. You're a pastor at is it Go Ye Outreach?
Right. I have been there for since 2014 until
senior pastors. And now I want us to shift this conversation, because we talked about, you know, our leaders going to churches every single Sunday, you know, congregants expecting money from these leaders. Actually, President William Ruto together with Rigathi have been questioning Raila, saying this man is too stingy. Where does he get the votes, you know? And can he start being generous just a little bit? From where you sit, this whole charade that we see with our leaders going to churches and, you know, getting to how should we deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, it's good for leaders to go to church. It's good for people to pray. It's good for people or a nation to be a nation that is built on the, you know, good foundations, Christian foundations, Islamic foundations, religious foundations, as it were, and that believes in God. But when we distort what the Holy Scriptures say about going to church and being humble and praying, and of course giving without really showing off, I think then we are going to really continue messing this thing up and trying to see that giving is, I have to compare and look at whether Jadiel gave more than I did, and therefore I'm holier than that, or than that other person. So the way we have handled church in Kenya is actually very wrong. And I do not want to begin by blaming the politicians again. This goes straight to the clergy and the people that really are given the mandate to run those churches. If an opportunity arose and I had a politician come to the church, they are going to sit down like another member. Of course, I will recognize them and honor them as leaders in our country, and maybe say hello to the people, but not do politics in the church. One of the things that we have done is that we have soiled the house of God. And the wrath of God will come to this nation because of that. It is not going to be because of the politicians, because politicians are doing what they know how to do best. Any platform that you give a politician and has the people, they will play politics, that is their job. But the work of the clergy and the preachers, like myself and the rest of the preachers, we need to be able to protect the sanctuary and the house of God. And whatever money is going to be given, I dare you, Jadiel, today, I will make sure it's not announced how much you or Ruto or anybody gave. Because you are giving, if you are genuinely giving from your heart to God, God knows and sees it, not because of show off. And therefore, this issue of the church, it is something that we need to question. Number two, we cannot be the ones to judge and say that maybe so and so such a politician is not as holy as I am, and therefore me, I'm the church of God. I'm sorry, I'm the leader that is appointed by God. But number three is the issue of false prophecies. One of the things that we realize, and we have seen different elections, is that politicians get even compromising even the preachers to start prophesying in their favor, to even come out and start dividing the church by saying, God has told me this so-and-so is going to be a leader. I'm not against prophecy, but much of what we have witnessed is something that has been used for political reasons. And therefore the church needs to wake up. But how are they going to wake up? They are going to wake up when the citizens themselves, they even start talking to their pastors and tell them, on this one, you are wrong. It is against what the word of God says. And for that reason, I am very much against politics in the church, which in fact includes insults from the pulpit. I'm sure you've seen that.
I've seen that numerous times. But what is the place of the clergy in politics too? I've seen Ole Sapit, coming out and saying we are not heading towards the right direction. This should be fixed. Kimani Ichung'wah obviously saying you do not know what you're talking about. You should come and educate me. When you see pastors getting into politics, what does that mean for you?
Okay. You see, your question is saying when you see pastors getting into politics is different from when pastors commenting about politics. That's different.
Okay.
The leaders, most of the revolutions or reforms have come from the pulpit. I mean, it's important for people to know that. Whether it's Dr. King, Martin Luther King and all that, that's where we have gotten a lot of reforms coming in, and people speak because most of the things that we expect even the governments to do are things that are outlined in the scriptures, taking care of the poor, the sick and the weak and all in the society. So when a leader, a spiritual leader, realizes that the king is actually not doing what is outlined. Prophets have always spoken to the king when the king is going wrong or going astray. And therefore, whether it's Ole Sapit or another leader, when they rise up and tell the king, you are naked, I think it's about time the king to realize that this is something to pay attention to. And therefore, I have to distinguish between the clergy or the church leaders who engage themselves in politics, in the politics of trying to divide the country by painting others to be evil and wrong, and those politicians who, the leaders, church leaders who come up and try to correct the leaders, the political leaders, the political class, that you are going astray. This is not what you're supposed to do. You cannot oppress the people. You cannot just go into whether it's I saw this thing of Mavoko and start getting to a point of trying to demolish houses, and you leave people without shelter, and then the next minute you announce that there's El Nino coming, and of course another minute you say because we prayed El Nino didn't come. I mean, there's just too much confusion about this whole thing. But let me say this, my friend Jadiel, just the clergy needs to rise up and be consistent in speaking truth to power. And the way to speak truth to power is to stick to the scriptures and not to get to a point of realizing that because you're in a certain political party, then you are more closer to God than the one who is another political party. That is not the role of the clergy. The clergy is to ensure that if you are going to advocate or espouse some of the things that go against the scriptures, we stand up and say it was not so from the beginning.
Do you feel like the clergy in Kenya has been compromised? Because we have some leaders going for one side, some leaders going for the other. I think Ole Sapit was being accused for being on Ruto's side. Do you think it has been compromised now because they are going into State House now and then every single time? Has it been compromised when you see them dining with our politicians instead of being outside and being the watchdog or sort?
The answer is the clergy has been compromised, and it gets compromised everywhere in the world. Because people know that, especially in Kenya where people are very religious, every single time I identify and I start saying that for me as a politician or as a certain leader, I'm a person who fears God, there is some softness that comes with that, and people feel like this is the right person because we expect somebody who fears God to do the right thing. And even without thinking too much, that alone earns you votes. Now, when the leaders of the church or the religious leaders, whether it's the Muslims or the Hindus or wherever it is, when they start going to State House, there's nothing wrong with that. If you're invited by a leader and the king, you go. But what do you do when you meet with this leader? Do you come and start really supporting policies that oppress the people? Then you are going against your calling. And therefore, for me to meet with you as a president, and I'm a pastor, I don't think there's anything wrong.
All right.
For me to meet with you and pray with you, I think it's my mandate and my calling.
Yeah.
But for me to start now siding with you in oppressing the people that we have been called to take care of, that is where then we go wrong. So the clergy has been compromised where they see no evil and say no evil. That's where the problem is.
We're 40 minutes into this conversation. I think it's a good place to wrap up. But before we do, what message do you have for our president, for our leaders here in Kenya, and for those that are like you living in the diaspora?
I mean, just come down to the reality of the people. People are suffering. Every single place that I go to, every time I visit Kenya, which I try to do at least 2-3 times a year, I've seen so much suffering, even from the same people that supported this government, the ones that are called the hustlers. They do not have money that they can live on. Their children are being sent away from school. Our women and children are even being denied health care services. Even though now there's a new policy coming up with the new NHIV and all that. But so far as we deal with this, let's look for a way of trying to feed our people and take care of the weak in the society. There are many things that we are talking about that we want to do. But those things seem to be things that are far off than the population that we serve. Let's understand the basic things first and do the first things first. And to the diaspora, it is about time we united and spoke truth to power, and also ask ourselves, if the current regime that you have and the leaders we have in the country were elected in the same country where you live in, would that country be what it is right now? Because we actually take these things as a joke, but this is people's lives. But let me ask you today, if what you are doing right now in this studio and all the programs that you run, this is your country, and you wanted to elect a president for that country that you are in charge of, we elect the current one. If your household, where you are, you needed somebody to manage that home, manage the finances and take care of everything, will you bring your current MCA or your current MP to be in charge of that home? If we don't crystallize these things into things that affect us, then we are thinking that hizi vitu zingine zote ni mali ya umma, lakini sisi, we are so much detached and separated from what is affecting us. But Jadiel and the rest of our listeners, I just want the Kenyan people to know that our people are suffering. They need change. We are overtaxing them, and we are actually getting to a point whereby we are going to cause a revolution in this country when the young people realize that they cannot eat empty hope forever. Our young people are graduating from school. If there will be no jobs out here for them to do, they will come for you.
Well, probably a good place to wrap up. It's been scary at the end. I hope you haven't scared my viewers that much. It's Pastor Esmond right here, all the way from Ohio, United States of America, the voice of the diaspora, representing a lot of people, not necessarily saying what they are saying there, but this is his opinion about what is happening in our country. Thank you so much for tuning in to Jadiel Kabiro Unfiltered. Share this video with as many people as possible so that can help our leaders make better policy decisions and informed political moves. Until we do talk again, have yourself a lovely rest of your day.